Welcome to Conversations. I'm Suresh Kochatill. Operation Sindoor is now on a pause, and that has given an opportunity for many people to analyze what went right, what went wrong, and what could have been done better during this operation. We have seen analysts in different news channels analyzing various facets of the war. If you can call it a war, I would call it a limited engagement. And of course, what happens if something else goes wrong tomorrow in terms of a terrorist attack, which Prime Minister Modi has promised will spark off another engagement and the ceasefire will be off the table. To discuss all this and more, we have with us Colonel V.V. Rao, retired from the Indian Army, an infantryman, and of course somebody who's seen war up close and personal in a different way in the hot region of Jammu and Kashmir. Welcome, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Colonel Rao, we have spoken before also on different occasions, but that time it was more peaceful because we were not speaking from an angle where things are right now. Now my question to you would be very, very simple, sir. Is Operation Sindoor, the way it was planned, of course we had time between the Pahalgam attack and the time when the operation was launched. And I remember distinctly a lot of people asking, when is Prime Minister Modi going to bomb Pakistan? And I kept on saying it requires planning, it requires actionable intelligence, and of course, it requires the coordination between Army, Air Force, and the Navy to make it happen. Do you think we had enough time this time to start the planning of the operation?
It is basically a reaction to an incident which has taken place now. So an incident has taken place on 22nd of April, and we have taken almost 10 to 14 days to react. And that much of time is required for reaction. It is not going to be just bombing the next day, one target, and that is what exactly Pakistan was expecting. They thought within 72 hours probably one aircraft will go fire a missile onto one of the suspected militant camp or terrorist training organization and then come back. They will also stage one more attack and to save their face, and then it closes. Now when we prepared for so much of time, got all our satellite imagery right and checked up probably with human intelligence various aspects, then we struck 9 targets, which was more than what they expected. That was a great lesson. So and we used restraint.
Yeah, that is the most important word that many observers are speaking about. Restraint is a word, the key word. Now when you speak, Colonel, you served in the Siachen Glacier, you served in Jammu Kashmir, I think 5 times? 5 times. During your time also there would have been numerous incidents, low intensity in all probability. But then Kashmir is always a hotspot, was a hotspot, and I think is still a hotspot. What do you think has changed over the last, say, 10 to 15 years in Jammu and Kashmir?
Certainly things have changed a lot. Pre-89, there was no terrorism. While the preparations were on by the Pakistani people, in India the reactions were not there. It started in 1989. But you could feel the simmering. When you go to a shop, he could very arrogantly say, you Indians cannot purchase this item. That used to happen.
Oh, that used to happen?
That used to happen. It happened with me only, at Lal Chowk.
Despite being an army officer?
Despite being an army officer, being in the uniform, having visited the SBI next door, I just walked into a shop which was selling handicrafts, probably carpets and all that. Then he says, you people Indians cannot purchase this. So that simmering was there. So then these Hurriyat and all these people manipulated the opinion. Then the support came across. Then 94, 95 it had peaked to 5,000 plus terrorists from a wide range of terrorist organizations, and as many as 12 to 13 of the organizations with Afghan trained manpower. that is, who had fought against Russia and then came this side, along with their weapons and equipment, which was supplied by America. As we took a stand, the things kept on coming down. And after Kargil, it took a drastic downstep. Now from that 5,000 strength, probably now it has come down to 120 to 150 strength. That is the maximum that I can expect as of now in Kashmir.
These are people who are there.
Terrorists who are there to cause physical harm.
Then coming over from the line of control is a different ball game.
That is infiltration is a different ball game. Even that is difficult, very difficult compared to the open borders which we had. Now we have got a fenced, electrified border. Of course, there are ways to beat it, and they do beat it, and sometimes they might succeed also. Now coming to that, these overt people, that is Jamaat-e-Islami Hind, Jammu Kashmir branch, which is the most virulent one. Now that Mr. Gilani is no more, they might have softened more.
Okay.
He was the main person, and his chamchas were the main aid people to the terrorism. Now it has changed. Now you can see the present government also. The way they performed earlier and the way they are performing and speaking now is entirely different.
So we saw that during demonetization. Sorry, I'm interrupting. You can carry on, sir.
So a lot of change is there. Even people's perception has changed because India started developing vertically. I mean, the graph is going more vertical than the horizontal. And secondly, after abrogation of 370, now they realize that there is no way. This is the better option rather than staying with Pakistan. And on the other side, the graph is going down as much as ours is going up. So obviously, yes, any citizen will prefer a side which is much better than the one which is lesser. So things have changed. It is not that things have not changed.
In fact, there is a pre-demonetization and post-demonetization phase in Kashmir. I am sure that during many operations where you were involved, when you cornered a terrorist or set of terrorists in a house or somewhere, people would come out from the nearby houses and start throwing thrones at the army men who are involved in the operation. They were allowing the terrorists to escape. We saw numerous such incidents. Now, but post-demonetization, we saw the stone throwing has stopped totally. So has after Friday prayers, the stone throwing has stopped. What do you think the reason suddenly that this stone throwing thing, both among the civilians throwing directly at the police forces and at army during operations, why has it stopped, sir?
Basically, the governance aspect also we must see. Just before abrogating Article 370, we had good lieutenant governors operating in the valley.
Okay.
So they made a lot of difference as compared to the incumbent democratic governments. Certainly there is a difference. Democracy has got some restraints.
Okay.
Then second thing is, after abrogation of Article 370, the fence sitters have come towards India. The low-level terrorists and the supporters, their structure is still intact. And probably these are the ones who have helped in this Pahalgam, and the way they are sheltering the terrorists is still there. But over a period of time, that percentage will keep coming down, but it will take more time.
Okay. Colonel, I'll not get into Pahalgam's intelligence failure or so-called intelligence failure. It's almost like a weather report almost. If you ask somebody if it's going to rain, they'll say it's rain. But there's no way of pinpointing and say these many number of terrorists are in this area and all that. I'm sure with your experience.
Firstly, there is nothing like intelligence failure. There are intelligence gaps and assessments. Now, sometimes the intelligence might flow in, but our own assessment might go wrong. There are like 9/11 inputs were there, but our assessments had gone wrong. That is there in the commission report, which was submitted to the US government.
Okay, and even 2611.
Even 2611.
So, Colonel, but international observers, now that the thing is on a pause button, not a stop button, as even the Army, Air Force and Navy have clarified that Operation Sindoor is ongoing, it is not stopped. But the ceasefire is on. Now, when you look at I've been watching a number of international observers, experts, who have looked at satellite imagery, who have looked at various reports that have come in, who looked at the damage caused to the Pakistani Air Force bases, radar systems and all that. There's one thing they are very clearly saying, this is a restraint in military strategy, what we did.
Yes.
We didn't go whole hog. We gave the Air Force pilots who were given the instructions by the political masters, the Prime Minister onwards, who were given the command to the Army, Air Force and Navy and saying, go ahead, do it. But they took the time, as you said, took 14 days and then did it on the 15th day. Do you think in the initial phase, did we make a mistake of hitting only the terrorist targets? Did we not anticipate that Pakistani army, air force would hit us back? They can't attack anything in India because we don't have a terrorist base. They would in fact hit the civilian and military infrastructure, including the air force. Do you think we should have also hit something beyond the terrorist targets?
No.
Okay.
Then we are not showing restraint. Then it is going to be an all-out war.
Okay.
For any incident of this nature, say we are not grading or rating incidents as such, but counter-terrorism is a thing which is difficult to prove in the court of law or in the international assessments or perception. So we played the restraint and allowing them to have a face saver. But unfortunately, they tried to go beyond face saver. And we are forgetting that we have also drawn the lines for the future conduct of mutual relationship by cancelling the IWT treaty and the cancellation of visas. Whereas visas, not much of impact will be there. But certainly IWT, it is a psychological impact which is more than a nuclear weapon. Then second thing is, their points of agenda for discussion which they are coming out in the media is IWT, whereas ours is counter-terrorism and POK. So these are two twin tracks, and I doubt whether they will meet. And if they don't meet, this Sindoor intensifying again is a very high possibility. And time factor, nobody can say.
Colonel, in fact, after you rightly said that we hit those 9 terrorist targets, there were 21 in the map, I believe, but we decided many of them were empty because the Pakistanis anticipated that we would hit them, like we did Balakot. So they emptied many of them. They left the masjids and so-called other religious places where these people were hiding. As we saw the funeral of 3 of those top terrorists with the Pakistani generals in attendance, which indicated with the Pakistani flag draped on it, that they were either a Pakistani officer with the terrorists, be it Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed or whoever it is. But what happened after the day 1, the 7th, 8th bombing by India on the terrorist camps, was a battle of narratives.
Yes.
Now, being in media, for people like me, and for a person sitting on the other side, a person like you, even though retired, you would say, no, narrative in media is not that important. But doing what we are supposed to do, or what we are mandated to do, is more important. Do you think many international observers say that we lost the narrative battle, India? Pakistan came out with fake news saying we shot down 1 Rafale, 2 Rafale, 3 Rafale, then they made 5, then 2 Sukhois to boot. Now I know they are all decoys which we sent. Do you think we were restrained in our approach when dealing with the media? Of course, we had a media briefing with Colonel Qureshi and Wing Commander Singh. But the question was could it have been more detailed, like what we had with the DGMOs who came out on the day 3 and day 4?
DGMO's briefing was actually high value briefing. It was not required.
Okay.
Your PROs, public relation officers, earlier Kargil also we had colonel level officers briefing, who later on became a chief also. That was sufficient enough because they give the same data. Even they showed the satellite imagery to some extent. Only thing is it was slightly too early to brief, so they did not have that adequate details. But that was good enough. Yes, one thing was there, we placed women officers in this thing, mainly because probably we got carried away by that title Operation Sindoor, where we wanted to convey the Indian public a message rather than the international message.
It was a question of optics.
Yeah, optics, yes. Some amount of optics is there always. Now coming to the DGMO's briefing. DGMOs are not briefing, they are not expected to brief. Of course, they are the highest people who have the knowledge of, integrate knowledge of every data and everything. Briefing to me by them is not warranted.
Was not warranted.
Was not warranted. It could have been done by colonel level officers.
But my question is, sir, from the media, we might ask some uncomfortable questions. Would a colonel level officer be able to answer those kind of questions which a DGMO or a naval DGMO or whatever, the Air Force DGMO, would they be able to answer? They would be in a kind of authority at a lieutenant general level to answer those questions, equivalent in Air Force and Navy, of course. But the colonel would obviously think twice before answering off-the-cuff questions.
Even the DGMOs had adequate discussions and brief before coming out on the media. That one can understand.
Yeah, one can make out the
One
questions.
can make out.
Yeah.
One can make out. Second thing is trained PROs. Like you and me are sitting. I also done public relations course. I am capable of briefing. I know. I handled counter-terrorism desk for 3 years.
Okay.
Actually. So we know what to reveal, what not to reveal, or what to what extent. That briefing can be done. One odd something might go wrong, but then one should not get too panicky about these things. Media, yes, everybody is looking for hyping things. That over a period of time, like now, everybody blames Pakistan for telling lies. And there are so many memes which are coming out. That will happen. People will realize after some time.
So the question, Colonel, obviously would be, if you go beyond the media part of it now into the actual things that happened during the three, there's a lot of discussion which people have gone through. I myself went to about a dozen channels. You have gone,
Yeah,
I've seen
yeah.
you on channels. The question is obviously is, one, this was a different kind of war. War, if you can call it that way. The usual scenario of being a typical infantryman that you are, that you have people with guns rushing across, you have tanks either following them or preceding them, then you have air cover, all this kind of stuff happens. Typical the 1971 war, the Longewala and other things, if you can take it, that example, or even the Bangladesh part, East Pakistan then. But this time, there was not much of movement of men or machine across the border. Whatever we had stayed within. It was a battle of drones, missiles, and of course, ICBMs. The question is, has war changed?
Yes, war has certainly changed. Technology is playing a greater role, there's no doubt about it. And this drone warfare, whether it is in Russo's Ukraine warfare or in our own Indo-Pak scenario, has certainly demonstrated, including Armenian and Azerbaijan warfare.
Clash.
It has changed. But ultimately, now one thing couldn't be that like being an infantry officer, I can be prisoner of my own experiences and training. But let me tell you one thing, catching hold of the ground is very important. Even in Russia invasion of that limited action, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia
Correct.
and Crimea. Now their borders are changing every day. Matlab 5 kilometers this side, left side, right side, and they are not been able to. Russia has not been able to stabilize despite all superiority. Until the time that ground is being held, Russia is able to dictate the terms to Ukraine, but Ukraine is playing that 5 kilometers plus minus zone to its advantage. That means holding ground is important. Now, if you look at the 10th night and the 11th night operations done by Pakistan, especially in sending swarms of drones, why were they focusing on the area between Jammu and Pathankot / Amritsar? They were terrifically afraid that India is going to launch a ground operation through this sector to capture POK. That is why they were sending more surveillance drones.
Not towards Gujarat, not towards Bhuj.
They were sending,
They were,
but then
less.
that were limited. Again, Barmer sector was important because in 1971 war we thrust almost 100 kilometers plus. So they were interested in that area. Whereas in the Jaisalmer area, that deserts Cholistan is not tankable at this point of time. So they were not really interested. They know that not much major thrust can take place there. But Firozpur northwards, especially between Amritsar and Jammu, they sent swarms. The reason was they were trying to find out every detail, how many men are there, where they are. Because one thrust, and secondly, one more incident happened during that time. Chenab was dried up for a couple of hours and days.
Correct.
And that was really giving sleepless nights for Pakistan.
We could have crossed Chenab.
We could have crossed Chenab and recaptured POK.
But the question, Colonel, interestingly is, being an infantryman again, the question was, of course, the drones could have been sent to spot our anti-aircraft positions, our missile defense systems. And everybody is talking of how wonderfully our air defense systems worked, be it manned by the Army or the Air Force or anybody for that matter, even BSF. The question was very obvious is, And the famous line by Lieutenant General Ghai, DGMO, at the press conference was, if Thomo can't get you, Lily will, alluding to the famous Australian pace bowler attack, as to how our, different levels of air defense systems catching this Pakistani missiles or drones coming from that side. Do you think this time, first time 71, after 71, Kargil was technically not a high-end war, it was more of a mountain warfare. Do you think we got our so-called, domestic manufacturing, which we were pulling down all the while, we were decrying it. But this time, we saw Akash Tir work, we saw the anti-aircraft guns upgraded with radars work, and of course our other mediums work, and then we had the S-400 which we got from Russia. But more importantly, our technology worked against the Chinese and the Turkish missiles and drones. Do you think Indian defense, actually air defense, has come to age now?
Yes, I'll add slightly more.
Yes, sir.
We are speaking about aerospace force. Now, Air Force may not own the ISRO assets, but ISRO also played a large
role. I forgot ISRO, correct.
Whether it is cartographic or photographic or command and guidance systems, it has played a large role. So we can consider actually there is a 3.5 force or fourth force also operating Space Force. We must give the credit to that.
Sure, the correct, sir.
Then second thing that happened is, anything technologies which we have achieved in ISRO and transferred to DRDO in the form of IGM, DMP, that integrated defense missile programs and all that, has succeeded very well. We are the latest in the world. The very fact that when, after seeing the success of S-400 being utilized by us effectively, Russia has offered to give us S-500 technology for co-development. But we are developing on our own, that is the latest news. Okay. A system better than S-500. And they have given a name also to that scheme. I'm just forgetting. I think it is Dhruv, some star name they have given. Okay. That speaks our technological prowess in this way. And secondly, integration of all these weapons through the computer means and interdicting the missiles, oblique drones and everything, we achieved a lot. Whether it is Akash Tir or whether it is Bhargavastra, whatever it is. Yes, defense technology, we are certainly going up, but still our aircraft engine making capability, our avionics, these require a lot of thrust.
Because I think engine also, some companies, Indian companies are speaking about producing engines in India now. I know we have fallen way back at Tejas.
We are still yet to catch up. Yeah. We had to give in our this thing, like say even tank engine, 1500 capacity engines, that we are still not able to, we are still importing from Russia.
Arjun was on the drawing board for a long time.
No, it got produced, but then it was not really an effective weapon like Merkava. Merkava, they beautifully did it. They went against all the norms of a production of a tank. They kept their engine in the front and did everything else.
So, Colonel, if you were in the Pakistani army, hypothetically, let us think, after whatever India achieved and promoting General Asim Munir to a field marshal level, which was a kind of a joke, what would you be worried about from the Indian angle?
Asim, firstly, thanks for regarding me as a Pakistani officer.
No, I'm just. This is the theory that we are playing out. It's a war game.
Firstly, I would have constructed a house in UK.
That is what they all do.
The second thing is, yes, becoming a field marshal, he has consolidated his role of a virtual dictator in Pakistan. That is what he has done.
But my understanding, Colonel, correct me if I'm wrong, usually a field marshal does not have, it's a ceremonial role, isn't it?
No.
Does he have a command and control?
Nobody has laid any references to this ever, even in India. Only thing is that we have given 3 field marshal equivalent ranks in India after their retirement, long after their retirement, except one.
Correct.
So we are presuming that these are honorary appointments.
This was General Karyappa, Field Marshal Manek Shaw,
and Air Marshal, Air Chief Marshal Arjun Singh.
Arjun Singh, yes, sir.
We did not have an Admiral of the Fleet.
Marshal of the Skies or whatever.
They call him Marshals, sorry, just
Okay.
no, I mentioned the word Air Chief Marshal to Marshal of the Air Force.
Marshal of the Air Force, yes.
Admiral of the Fleet is the word which is used
Used
for
for
naval
naval.
correspondent.
And we never had any.
So far we did not have any. I think they will give ample opportunity because Indian Ocean is bigger than India.
Correct, so that's true. So now let's come back to this part. Pakistan used Chinese air defense system. Now why I put you on the Pakistani side is to understand. They had this Chinese aircraft. They have an old fleet of F-16s, which is very aged. I think 84 is when they started
Yes.
using, F-16s into it. It was part of the Afghan war deal
Yes.
that US got from, so Pakistan got from the US. Now the question is very simple is, with all these, they were not able to thwart our missiles, be it from BrahMos to the other missile that we use, be it Scalp or be it Raptor or other things that we used. None of them were stopped by the Pakistani air defense system. What do you think went wrong with that?
Firstly, most of the technology was borrowed or purchased outright from China, North Korea, and to some extent American equipment which was used in Afghanistan. So they did not have a qualified, trained personnel over it.
That's exactly what I heard, Colonel. Sorry interrupting you.
Yeah.
I will lose my train of thought. This is exactly what foreign experts are saying. Most of the equipment were bought in the last 2 months.
Exactly.
Maybe as a Pahalgam planning, they anticipated India would hit, but their forces, the men behind or the women behind the machines, unlike India, did not get the training. Carry on.
There are reports that 2-3 Turkish people, army personnel,
also
died
died.
in Pakistan trying to teach them how to use UAVs. Now, second thing that is going to happen is China is looking at another way. China is thinking this is a test bed for their Taiwan invasion. So they are planning to supply J-35s within next 3 months or 4 months, and they want to test them. Probably they are.
This is like giving a guy who's driving a cycle, a Lamborghini. Isn't it equivalent?
Yes, exactly. Or a driverless car and sitting in that. Driverless cars in India do not work mainly because
Because
driving
one should
standards
realize
are-
the power of it. The training is a process that takes
Yes,
years
exactly.
to perfect. You can't just overnight train people. And I think, Colonel, go on. I think the main problem, the main thing I want to ask you.
Integration also. See, what happens is, it is better to have a bullet motorcycle and a corresponding equipment and run it more effectively rather than trying to bring a car and use it in deserts or sandy areas. Something like that. And secondly, your standards must be all together. What should we say? Our standards says education, training, and all this must be matching that. Suppose, like sometimes you see people just somewhere they lay their hands on that iPhone, but they don't know how to use it. It is something like that. Pakistan is unable to, whereas ours is ingrown. Most of the technologies are now especially being used, except for few, including nuclear submarines, are developed in India. So we are able to effectively utilize them.
Colonel, one of the things that, of course, we saw in this war, a very close coordination between the Air Force and the Army on one side, and of course the Navy was sitting in the Arabian Sea waiting for their orders, especially hitting at Karachi Harbour, if it came to that. Theatre command is something that General Bipin Rawat had come up with during his time, but unfortunately, due to his demise, it took a back seat. Kargil saw a problem which everybody realized that the Air Force was not coordinating with the Army good enough because they are different commands and they have to take their orders from different forces. Do you think the time has come now for an integrated theatre command between the Army, Air Force and the Navy? Or do you think there is an ego battle when a naval officer is deployed in a forward area like, for example, Pathankot, and made the CDS for that area? Or I don't know whether theatre command works at what level. Is it at a colonel level, or is it at the brigadier level, or does it even go upwards?
No, it works up to Army commander level, or AOC in C, or FOC in C.
So do you think there's an ego problem that if an Air Force officer heads a naval kind of integrated thing at the sea, is there a problem?
It is not exactly personal egos, I personally feel. It might be organizational egos. Second thing is, whenever we learn something or anything, we become prisoners of that learning. Somehow we don't do the unlearning aspect when required. So what happens is you tend to give importance to your own subject where you have excelled. So a naval officer, the possibility of thinking that hitting Karachi is better than hitting Lahore. Whereas an army person hitting Lahore is more important compared to an Air Force officer thinking Islamabad is a better target.
Psychologically.
Psychologically, because their reach is there. He is more comfortable in that. Integrated theatre commands involves all three services. Beyond that also, for example, I did an exercise with the UK force, wherein the External Affairs Ministry rep was there. There was a audit rep, that is that finance ministry rep was there, because that brigade was supposed to be deployed in third world countries to take over the system when things fail, something like Congo.
Yeah, UN force kind of
UN force, where they use force to get into the country. So then finance is required, then your MEA rep is required. So this is the level of integration which is required to be achieved. Yes, there are required to be doctrines, but slowly one thing we are realizing is that ours is becoming a developed country. I mean, actually it is a sign of a developed country. In developed countries, things become more flexible, more adaptive. You tend to adapt to the other's point of view more, and rather than sticking to your own guns every time. That happens. And secondly, what happens over a period of time is now you see the youth. Willingness to join armed forces is less than as compared to the joining the IT sector or going abroad altogether. That happens in a developed country. Probably that is a sign of a developed country. And the theatre commands are practical, but it will take a long time because they have to be integrated at every level. I believe there are certain courses already being learned for women officers in this aspect so that they can be posted on staff and integrated. Yes, some amount of doubts will be there, but over a period of time they have to get adjusted, and they also have to change their psychological perception. In fact, there is a psychological way of the way officers from different arms and services and the forces also operate.
In fact, we never spoke in detail about the war itself because a lot of channels have covered it. I don't want to get into the way the missiles were fired from here to there, where the BrahMos was used, not used, whether Pakistanis were able to actually hit the Adhampur base or not hit the Adhampur base, whatever said and done. Because we are looking at from a more extensive 36,000 feet view onto the entire conflict that we had. Last but not the least, before we close this conversation, is finally the men on the ground. What I meant is even in the air or in the sea or in the ground, is the fact that we have realized, and there was an article yesterday in the Times of India or Hindustan Times where they said the Agniveers worked excellently well in this. 3,000 of them had baptism literally by the fire this time, manning the anti-aircraft guns and other systems. The question obviously would come, we had a large army at one time, the size subsequently got reduced. 85%, correct me if I'm not wrong, Colonel, was of the salaries and the pensions were part of the defense budget. Only 15% was left over for development or buying capex. We are trying to bring them down with the Agniveer, which became a big political hot potato. The question is very simple, is should we have quality or quantity? What should be the manpower matrix according to you?
This Agniveer scheme, which is basically meant for the Jawans and the JCOC equivalent,
yes,
is perfectly fine. I had only one observation at that point of time. Instead of 4 years, make it 7 years.
You did mention it, one of my earlier interviews, yes.
4 years is too short a time to get baptized or whatever we call it, warfare oriented, because he hardly sees anything. One field and one peace posting at the best he sees, and that too if he is lucky. Otherwise he might see more field posting and less of peace posting, or more of peace posting and less of field posting. That is 7 years is more. Second thing we must realize, we are one of the few countries which has got 2.5, now it is becoming 3.5 slowly with the Bangladesh behavior, the way it is going on.
Correct.
Obviously you require a large standing army and it has to be spent. Whether we like it or not, we have created a country with no roots, and that country without roots will always keep doing something or other.
Should we look at army as a job or as a service? That is like Israel has a different philosophy in this.
No, I agree. This Agniveer system is a good way to give more exposure to more people, firstly. Second thing is to release the trained manpower and disciplined manpower back to the society so that they function better. Always. it should not be taken as a job, but what happens to these people who are left out and go back to the civil arena? Now 25%, as you were mentioning other day,
CAPFs.
CAPFs will take over, but what about the remainder 50%?
No, Colonel, I have a parallel question for you there. Sorry, I'm interrupting
Yeah.
you again. Short Service Commission officers. Now you're talking of Jawans and JCOs. Short Service Commission officers served for 5 years,
Yes,
and then they are out of the system.
yes. Now it is 10 years.
10 years. So they also have a same problem, isn't it? They get into the civilian life, they join either set up a security agency or join a MNC because the kind of discipline they carry with them. Do you think they got adjusted it better? Because adjusting in a civilian life is pretty tough. And the question obviously being asked is, you're training young men to handle weapons, and tomorrow, you know what happens if they get a weapon in the hands and they are in the civilian life and they get frustrated, what do they do with it? The question is obviously we need to keep them employed. We need to give them police force also. State police force can be another 25%. Maybe the army component can be increased from 25 to 50%. What are your thoughts?
I think this 25% system is okay. In USA, there is a system, there is a unique numbering system, they call it 401 or something like that, in which if a job is applied by ex-serviceman, he gets priority over the others. Okay. Unfortunately, our country is full of contradictions. There is 50% reservation already, and ex-serviceman reservation will cause heartburns in the civil society, the way it had happened in Bangladesh just recently.
Oh, correct.
One of the reasons why there was too much of reservation. So that might backfire against the government. And already many state governments are playing other games, minority religions and all these things. So that way, what I personally feel is they should be retrained and given some important. Like say, I'll just give an example. In most APS, the Telangana RTC corporations have always been headed by IPS officers. They have got plenty of opportunities, IPS officers. Now, why can't this be given to army officers, like all these organizations? So the central government must identify the jobs. Unfortunately, Times now, managed by Times of India, when you say you are an ex-army person, straight away he takes you to the column security guard. So they think that everybody is a security guard, one who works in the army, not realizing that we are much better than even the IT people.
Yeah, in fact, I've just read a story day before yesterday, very heartwarming story that BrahMos,
Yes.
which has worked one of our major stays in this particular battle, has actually said that they will absorb a large number of Agniveers into their technical area.
Yes, that is okay. These are technical people, but what about the basic combat arms, armored corps, mechanized infantry? These are all.
These are from the Agniveers. I'm just saying from the Agniveers, they're saying whoever is technically competent, we will take them into thing, and whatever we are outsourcing in terms of security, housekeeping and everything, again we will absorb Agniveers into that. Do you think at least the PSUs should start using Agniveers into their structure?
Yes, they should. What I'm saying is this bulk of the army is infantry. 5.5 lakhs is actually infantry.
Out of the
For Indian Army.
12 lakhs or 14 lakhs we have?
12 lakhs.
12 lakhs.
So 400 units plus RR units. That is 460 to 500 units of the army is infantry. Now, these people are not technically qualified. That is not because they are not, they are lesser capable. It is because the civil perceives that when you write in your CV, I had 5 years of this particular experience, then they think you are expert. If you don't write, like I do have I have handled the job when I applied for bank jobs. There is something known as counter, when you Binami transactions, this
tracing that, yeah.
Tracing that, this thing. I applied for some of those jobs. I had actually done this job also while even in the army.
Okay.
But none of them ever considered. They took out, they did not even reply. See, basically they never think that an army officer can do this sort of a thing.
I think that requires a change of mindset.
Yes. And the private corporate sector must be forced to change.
That's what.
That is what is required. Unfortunately, that is not happening.
I'm sure, Colonel, going forward, I think the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister, and also, of course, the other ministries, including the Education and HR ministries, what we call now, and the private sector, more importantly, should understand the importance of getting a trained manpower. Israel has that advantage. We don't have that advantage. that every citizen there gets trained. We are too huge a population for that. But it was a wonderful conversation, Colonel V.V. Rao, and I'm sure if our kind of the people watching this podcast feel that we didn't get into the actual operations part of it, that was deliberate, because too many channels are discussing that. We have wanted to get into overall, as I said, a 36,000 feet view about what exactly this particular skirmish that we had with Pakistan was, and what is the road ahead, and what's the kind of manpower issues that we are talking of. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel V.V. Rao, thank you very much for coming to.
Thanks for giving me an opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Operation Sindoor was a lesson that we learnt had to be done in a particular way. There was not much time to prepare. 15 days we all had, but we did it. An army, air force, and of course even our navy, plus our border security force and other security operations, they all worked wonderfully well. Lot of lessons, lot of takeaways from this. But sure, in the days to come and even the months to come, there'll be a lot of analysis done on Operation Sindoor, which can be implemented in our armed forces to improve what we are doing now. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind.